Welcome to Women's Leadership Today. We're your hosts, Michelle Myers
and Nikolette Sorosky. We're bringing you the latest in leadership development and expertise.
Every month we have a theme for Women's Leadership Today, and the theme for November is confidence. Nikolette, I think this is a topic we can all relate to. I know there are times when I have given a presentation and felt prepared and confident, and then there's been plenty of times where I haven't felt confident at all. I think we've all had those moments. How about you?
Absolutely. This topic is one that takes up a lot of space in my life. Confidence is something I've struggled with pretty much my entire life. So it's something that I'm constantly looking to tune in and learn more about, and kind of figure out how to bolster myself in those different areas. And it's such a relatable topic too. In the books
Mhm.
we read for book club, in other podcasts we've done, even in our events, like this topic always seems to come up, even if it's not specifically the theme being covered.
True.
It has a lot, confidence has a lot to do with all of, our outcomes, our decision making, our performance. If you're lacking in confidence, those things are going to be lacking as well. And I
Mhm.
know for me, a lack of confidence personally has held me back. Sometimes I give up on things. I don't take on opportunities that even I might even be able to handle. It's something I'm really working to improve on a daily basis. So this is a topic that's super duper important to me. Michelle, do you consider yourself to be a particularly confident person?
I think it really depends on the situation and how much preparation I've done or how much I know about the subject. And the work setting, for me, it's about preparation, anticipating the information people will need and the questions that might be asked. So I really try to think about what's my goal, what information is going to be needed, what questions might come up, but socially, I think it really depends on if I already know people at an event or I have something I can easily connect with them on. Obviously, if it's, let's say, a PTA event, well, we have kids that go to the same school. So that's easy to connect on. But there's definitely times when, my confidence definitely isn't always what it should be.
Absolutely, and I totally agree with you on the social aspect. I'm kind of the same way. As long as I have one thing I can kind of connect on, that makes it a lot easier to handle those
Mhm.
situations. It's so interesting too that you say it depends on the situation, because it's like it's so true, right? Sometimes, just like you were saying, sometimes you walk into a situation, maybe that something you've dealt with before, or maybe with people you've been with before, and you feel that confidence come on immediately. You just like, I'm the life of the party, right? And then sometimes you sometimes you can walk in and you can immediately just feel yourself kind of seize up, get a little nervous, right? Um, in one of our books we read for book club, Spark, and I've talked about this back in episode 10, so I'm not going to harp on it too much, but they say something really interesting in that book, and that is that they believe confidence is more of an emotion than it is a skill. So that kind of explains that ebb and flow, how confidence can kind of be ever present, and then sometimes confidence can feel like we can't even find it, right? I think that's really
Mhm.
interesting. So the skill is really more regulating that emotion than it is about actually having confidence as like a soft skill. What do you think about that?
Well, I do remember reading about that, and I do understand what they're trying to say. But I also think confidence is a skill we can work on. I mean, there's definitely emotional side of it,
Mm,
but in some of our workshops, we've talked about the power of preparation, preparing for a presentation, or even if it's just like a one-on-one meeting with a team member, your manager, whomever. It's knowing how to and it's knowing how to handle questions you can't answer off the cuff. I think that's where a lot of the nervousness comes from. It's,
Yeah.
well, what if I'm put on the spot and I'm asked something I don't know? Am I going to be expected to answer it right then? And a lot of times, no, you don't have to. But it's really knowing how to handle. It's knowing how to handle the unexpected, preparing for the unexpected,
Yeah.
I think, and also how to handle, the naysayers. But being prepared and practicing, I think just the act of doing that makes you feel more confident.
I loved what you said there about being able to kind of expect the unexpected, because I think that is a huge deterrent in confidence. Is those moments where you go in and you're like, um, oh my gosh, like what if this happens or what if that happens, or if something comes up that you weren't expecting. I think that can be a huge blow to your confidence. And you are absolutely right. Practice does make perfect. Practicing those scenarios, practicing, it's always going to happen. There's always going to be unexpected. We're never going to be able to come up
Yeah.
with everything that could possibly happen, but taking the time to sit down to prepare yourself to practice, and to kind of think over some of those scenarios definitely can bolster your confidence. And I think another thing too is, you know having those opportunities to practice those scenarios, whether it's, anything that you're not confident in, public speaking, writing, customer service, et cetera, whatever it is, finding opportunities, like you said, to practice those opportunities and to
Mhm.
get those wins, those small wins, even if they're like, like prior made up scenarios that you're just going over. If you feel like you can overcome those, if you feel like you can have those successes, that'll really bolster your confidence, more naturally in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more we feel like we know about something, the more confident we are. And there's very rare, at least in the workplace, where you're going to go into a situation, at least not having some idea of the expectation, the subject matter, the
Yeah.
topics to be at hand. But of course, there's always those moments when we're stopped in the hallway, and a C level, exec says, hey, Michelle, what's the latest update on that? And it's okay to not know or have the answer and say, you know what, that's a great question. Let me look at that and get back to you, something to that degree. I mean, not everyone can expect you to have all the answers all the time. But when we're talking about lack of confidence, a big consequence of that is the imposter syndrome. And I'm not sure if you're
Hmm.
really familiar with that. You might have heard it come up in some
Oh,
of
I
our
am.
discussions, some of our yeah, and it's for those who aren't familiar with that, the imposter syndrome is this idea where we feel like a fraud or like you're not qualified for something, even though those around you, um, believe you are qualified. Maybe you were made the lead on a team or a project, and you're thinking, why did they give this to me? I don't deserve this. I don't know what I'm doing. And this is something that many women at all levels have experienced at one time. It's not just emerging leaders, it's
Hmm.
senior level executives as well. And even some very notably successful people still struggle with this feeling that they somehow don't deserve their success. And Sheryl Sandberg, that's a name a lot of us are familiar with. She served as the COO of Facebook and wrote the book Leaned In. And there's a quote I want to share. She said, "Every time I didn't embarrass myself or even excelled, I believed that I had fooled everyone yet again. One day soon, the jig will be up." I just thought that was so fascinating.
Oh my
Someone
gosh.
as notable as Sheryl Sandberg, I'm a CEO of Facebook,
Yeah. Yeah.
even someone at that level could have that feeling as I'm a fraud. I don't deserve to be here. So what do you think about that, Nicolette?
It's literally crazy to me to think that someone who could achieve that level of success, feels the same way that, I've felt before. You know what I mean? Like,
I
I
know.
feel it's sometimes I'm like, I feel this way, and I feel like it's easy for me to feel this way because I'm sitting, near the bottom of the totem pole a lot of the times. But it, it's it's really just proves how relatable this topic is, that someone like Sheryl
Mhm.
Sandberg can feel this way as well. And I know I've dealt with, even in my current position, which is probably, by title the highest one I've accomplished, and by responsibility as well. And you know, I've done pretty well in this position. I've had definitely more highs than lows. I feel like I get a lot done. And I know for sure, my colleagues tell me all the time I'm doing a very good job. And still, I come home and I can't tell you how many times I've told my husband, like, I feel like I must have lied in my interview. Like, I feel like like I feel like I somehow tricked them into giving me this position. And it's so weird because it really doesn't make any logical sense to feel that way given the acknowledgement I've received. I mean, and I've felt this in other positions too, where I've actually received like awards certifications. I mean,
Mm.
and I still come out feeling like, how did I finagle my way into this situation? It just doesn't feel like it's my win somehow. Anyway, Michelle, I personally think that you are a person that comes off incredibly confident and competent. Have
Oh,
you
thank
ever
you.
felt
Oh my
this way?
gosh. Well, I don't know if I've dealt specifically with imposter syndrome, but I've certainly been in a position plenty of times where I was responsible for something that I felt I had no clue about. And this has probably happened more outside of work. But I've certainly thought to
Mm.
myself, who thought it was a good idea to put me in charge of this? That could be with, when I was treasurer of PTA, like that was a huge responsibility, a lot of money. Filing, tax forms, all these different things, a lot of responsibility. And if it was done wrong, it would have had serious consequences for a lot of people. And
Hmm.
it was like, well, why? I mean, even though I ran for the position, I got it. I was like, oh, who really? Are you sure you want me doing
Yeah,
this?
I mean, that's exactly it, right? Like you run for the position. If you're running for the position, you know that you have some kind of qualification to do it. You wouldn't just do it because it seems like a fun thing to be treasurer of the PTA one day.
Yeah.
So you must feel like you have some kind of qualifications. But even after you get voted in, you still had that feeling of like, oh, are you guys sure? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And that's
that
kind of what we're
was
talking about.
self-doubt. Yeah, that self-doubt definitely creeps in.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of different sources, I mean, that I've heard in books and TED Talks and all kinds of stuff, is that this idea of imposter syndrome really a huge reason for it is actually societal, which I
Mm.
think is really, really interesting, right? Not only are we taught from a young age as women not to aim as high as our male peers a lot of the time, but we also don't have as many examples of success laid out in front of us, like role models and stuff like that, because we don't hold as many positions at the top. So it doesn't seem like a normal occurrence. As a result, we tend to tell ourselves that if we're successful, it was somehow a trick, a fluke, or random circumstances, or like you were saying, right? Like, are you guys sure? Even though I've proved I'm qualified and you've voted me in, are you sure about this? I think that's interesting that there is that societal component to it as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree about that and about it, societal pressure. And I think also adding to that pressure we put on ourselves is, social media. When we see a Pinterest perfect party someone has put
Mm.
together, or we're on Instagram or Facebook and we see those, fabulous family vacations, and then we look at our own, and we feel like we need to live up to that. At least I know I've put that pressure on myself, actually feeling like I've let down my family because our vacation doesn't look as, fabulous as someone else's. And we all know in our hearts that what we're seeing, on Instagram or Pinterest, whatnot, is not the reality. It doesn't show the nitty gritty that we all know is there, especially when we try to travel with our kids. But still, somehow we get that ingrained that we're not living up to certain expectations. And it's it's a real challenge. And we just tend to put these unrealistic expectations on ourselves. And I think we can do that both at work and at home.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you about social media. It can make it so hard because everyone is putting up their best selves on social media. Everybody looks confident,
Hmm.
competent, happy on social media. Nobody's going to show you those moments where they feel weak. Nobody's going to show you those moments where they failed because it's all about showing off, right? And it's so funny what you said about Pinterest because I just kind of had that experience. I was helping to plan my baby shower. I'm like looking through the Pinterest
Oh,
pictures and I'm like, I'm like, oh, I'm never gonna be able to make anything look that good. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's not even about being perfect, right? It's about the experience. It's about the success. And I had a great time.
absolutely.
I might not have been Pinterest perfect, but I had a fantastic time. And the planning we did really came out in the end. Big props to my mom and aunt because they did most of it, um,
No.
but it's really about those successes, right? Remind yourself that everyone else is dealing with the same feelings, and work on building yourself up. Just kind of like what you were saying before with the practice, right? The more
Hmm.
you tell yourself, looking at those pictures, looking at those events, saying, um, we're putting out our best image, but everyone deals with this. This is something that is, again, so relatable. The more you hold yourself back and you give into that self doubt, the more you're going to default to those feelings. But the more you successfully practice recognizing those moments of weakness, recognizing that you can have that confidence, the more you're likely to trigger that again in the future.
Absolutely. And because this is so common and so universal, this is a topic we cover often at Progressive Women's Leadership. And one area that tends to make us feel less than confident is speaking and presenting, right? And having the confidence to advocate for ourselves and our ideas and just getting our voices out there in front of the right people. But being confident when communicating, or at least coming across as confident. There's that old adage, fake it till you make it. But if we can at least, come across as confident, it'll open up a lot more opportunities for us. And one of my favorite events led by Cheryl Grazier, one of our expert presenters and a previous podcast guest, is the event called Speak with Confidence, Clarity, and Credibility Must Have Skills to Make an Impact. And in the first part of that event, Cheryl shares 6 great tips for calming your nerves and building confidence before speaking. And we have a clip from that right here for you.
And there's some secret tips on how you can do some of this. Now, when we talk about relaxing, oh, that sounds real easy, Cheryl. You can relax. You've done this. What about us? Well, we all have some ways of relaxing. A gentleman by the name of Jack Canfield, you might know him from the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. Jack Canfield talks about every time he presents that he'll walk away and find a place that's a little bit quiet and then does a few shoulder rolls, just lifting his shoulders up and rolling them. That calms him down and it changes how the body feels and looks. So if you can make that step away, roll those shoulders. And when you do that, it shifts the focus of your anxiety. And therefore, you will become a little bit more relaxed. We also talk about shifting focus. Now, when we think about public speaking, a lot of people think that it's a performance. Well, it can be, but think about it as communication. So train your mind that this is a communication piece and you are communicating a specific purpose, a reason, an action that you're wanting people to take. And when you shift that focus and take it away from the presentation or, excuse me, the performance, it helps you relax as well. helps you relax as well. We talk a little bit about the presentation blueprints. I call them the magic formulas. And they give me the highlights of what I need to remember for 3 different types of presentations. Practice. Practice the presentation. I think of the practice as that piece that needs to be done more than once. Now, it's very interesting because most people say, well, when I practice, I just read my presentation on the paper that it was delivered on, that I'm taking with me. Say it out loud. Run through it. Think about how it rolls off the tongue. Think about how your presentation sounds. If it's hard for you to follow the rhythm, it will be hard for your audience. Now, be yourself. Be yourself. Your audience can tell whether you're being genuine or not. When you're practicing, think about practicing in front of someone who doesn't know anything about what your presentation is on, and then ask them for their feedback. So those are some highlighted tips. You can see that I said practice speaking. Now that 6th one, practice speaking, not only means practice the presentation you're doing, but find ways to practice public speaking. Sign up for more. Take a class on public speaking. Find ways to put yourself out there, and it's going to make a huge difference.
I love this. Cheryl gave these tips for public speaking, but I feel like they can really be applied to so many different situations you find yourself where you might
Oh
not be
yeah,
the most
definitely.
confident, right? And
Mhm.
you hit the nail on the head before, Michelle, because Cheryl spends a lot of time in the workshop talking about how to be sufficiently prepared.
Why do
And
you think
this
I got
applies more to
it?
yeah, exactly, right? And it applies more to just than the public speaking, like I was saying before, you know.
Mhm.
I know even in my everyday life, for example, just sitting down, preparing, making a short list of things I need to get done can help me feel like more confident, more empowered to get through a particularly difficult day and stuff like that. I think that, you know, again, you nailed it with the practice, then that preparation, it's key.
Yeah, preparation and practice are definitely key. And I also liked our suggestion about getting feedback. That outside of point of view can really be valuable and give us some
Mhm.
insights that we might not get just from even, recording, let's say, and watching ourselves. Having someone else's perspective can really shed some light on what we're doing right, as well as some areas that we need to work on.
Absolutely. And another point I really love that she makes is changing the way the body looks and feels. Now, this
Hmm.
is something I've practiced a lot. I personally love the TED Talk by Amy Cuddy, as well as her book Presence, which is all about the science behind the power of body language. And not like the body language you use when you're presenting to people, right? That's another skill that you can practice to help kind of build that confidence and make people take you seriously, but I'm talking more about the body language that you use on your own, right? That you use on your own time and that you build up before you go into those situations. It's so interesting, all the science behind it. It can actually shift your mindset to being a stronger and more open, just like the body poses you take, right? It's something small that you can practice that isn't necessarily putting yourself out there or just, you know, recording
Hmm.
yourself, like you said, and stuff like that. It's something small that you can practice on your own time and by yourself. Which, you know, an introvert like me, I love that.
Yeah, how we carry ourselves definitely reveals how we're feeling inside. And this applies in person or even in a virtual meeting. So even if you're meeting, over Zoom or Teams or something like that, still how you carry yourself really says a lot about how you're feeling, how confident you feel. And for me, even the simple act of, sitting up, shoulders back, makes me feel more confident and present, even if I'm just on the phone and no one can see me, just having that
Absolutely.
confident posture really makes a difference. And it's like they say, if you're feeling down, if you smile and just keep smiling, eventually, well, one, it'll come through your voice. People will hear you smiling, but also it'll actually make you feel happier. I mean, it sounds silly, maybe kind of trite, but these are little tips that actually do work. And Nicolette, as we wrap up this episode, I think a key takeaway is that when we don't feel confident, there are in fact steps that we can take through preparation and practice to help us get there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great takeaway that, even all these little steps we're talking about, preparation and practice really is key to help you build that confidence. The more confidence you feel in that preparation during that practice, the more confidence you're going to feel going into those situations.
Hmm.
And that is all the time we have for today, unfortunately, Michelle. Although, this is a great topic, we could talk about it forever. So,
Absolutely.
um, for our listeners, we release 2 episodes every month. You're not going to want to miss a single one. You can now watch us on YouTube and listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and almost anywhere podcasts can be found. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and follow along with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. Just as a update as well, we will only be releasing 1 episode in December. Otherwise, it was great talking to you today, Michelle, and goodbye to all our listeners. Thanks for tuning in.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening. Progressive Women's Leadership is passionate about providing the best tools to help you reach your fullest potential. Visit us today at progressivewomensleadership.com for access to workshops, articles, e-guides, and much more to help you further develop your skills and advance your career.